Hello all, welcome to a very focused session on service tax in Tally ERP9 5.0. We intend to make this an overview session on service tax, but we will also not cover the domain aspects of service tax as this is beyond the scope of this session. The session will proceed in the order shown on the slide. First, we'll cover the business requirements. Then we'll go through a product walkthrough, which we'll cover in 4 phases. First, we'll see how will the experience be for a first-time user. Then we'll move on to the triangulation report. Then we'll move on to the returns. How do we save the returns and how do we view the revised returns? Then we'll move on to the guidelines for the existing users. The third agenda would be the summary, and the fourth one, the FAQs. The business requirements. Now, the two big questions that a businessman asks himself are: is my tax return reconciled with the transactions? And am I paying the right tax to the government? If returns are reconciled with transactions and the right tax is paid, there is never a problem. But if errors are discovered in the returns, or if the wrong tax is paid to the government, there are penalties and fines in addition to the harassment he goes through. Now, typically, every businessman would want to ensure that returns reflect book accurately. The tax returns must reflect the underlying transactions accurately. This is a basic need. We cannot have the tax ledger showing one figure and the tax return showing another. Tax payments are accurate. Now, to ensure that returns are accurate and tax payments are correct, transactions must be entered correctly as per service tax rules. Missing information and possible errors can be identified and corrected easily. Now, information required for generating returns can be missed out. Errors can happen. It is important that the software has a simple, accurate, and fast way in which these can be identified so that timely corrections may be done before filing the returns. Simple to set up and start. Now, every businessman wants that his taxes are managed in a simple manner, that the initial step is minimal and takes just a few minutes, and that no expertise is needed. Let us see how Release 5.0 addresses all these requirements and makes service tax management simple. First, let us see how simply a first-time user can set up service tax and start using Release 5.0 in minutes. Scenario 1. Let's take a simple business scenario where a company provides only one type of product and a single rate of service tax is applicable. Let's move on to the product to see how we implement the scenario 1 in Release 5.0. We'll create a new company. Let's call it NHC Private Limited. And we'll accept the screen. We'll first enable service tax. We'll go to F11, Statutory and Taxation. We'll say enable service tax as yes. Set alter service tax detail as yes. We'll specify the service tax registration number. We'll select the type of organization as partnership. We'll select compute tax liability based on accrual basis. Set alter service tax detail as yes. We'll be able to define service category at the F11 F3 master level from Release 5.0. Now we'll define a particular service category which we want to use consistently for all the service categories that we define for this company. Let's call it advertising services. We'll define the service tax rate as 14%, which is the new rate, and we'll accept the screen. Let's create a few masters. Go to Accounts Info, Ledger, Create. We'll create a company called ABC Limited under Sundry Debtors, and we'll accept the screen. Now, before moving on, we'll need to enable another option in F11 Statutory and Taxation. We set alter service tax detail as yes. Now we see an option here called define service category and tax detail as masters. We'll set this to yes. Now this option will allow us to create more service categories other than what we had defined at the master level. Let's create some more ledgers. We'll go to Accounts Info, Ledgers, Create. We'll create a ledger called telephone charges. We'll classify it under purchase. Is service tax applicable? We say yes, applicable. Set alter service tax detail as yes. Now we do not see a category that is applicable for this particular ledger, so we can create a category from here. Let's call it telephone services. We'll specify the rate for this, again 14%, and we'll accept this. We'll create another ledger called BSNL under sundry creditors. And we'll accept. We'll create another ledger called advertising under sales. Is service tax applicable? We'll say yes, applicable. We would not need to set alter service tax details for this particular ledger because we wanted to get the service tax details from what we defined at the master level. So we can just accept this. We'll create a service tax duty ledger. We classify it under duties and taxes. We select service tax. We select service tax again. And we accept this. Now let us pass a sales voucher. We go to accounting vouchers, sales. We'll select the company ABC Limited. We'll select advertising. We'll enter an amount, let's say rupees 1 lakh. We'll select the service tax ledger and we can see that the duty gets calculated on its own. And we accept the screen. Now we can see that how service tax gets calculated automatically based on the configuration we had done at the company creation level. So you've seen how easy it is to record the transactions. You simply enable service tax at the company level, define the applicable rates, create normal expense and party ledgers, enter transactions, and see service tax getting auto-calculated in transactions. If the service tax rate changes, simply change it at the company level. There is absolutely no need to wait for Tally Solutions to provide a stat release. Of course, if forms are changed, they will be delivered by Tally Solutions via capsules. The benefits. Setting up service tax is simple. As you saw, it can be done in seconds, not even in minutes. Because of simple and quick setup, sales calls can be closed very quickly. Imagine how many more calls you will be able to make and therefore how many more sales you will do. You don't need to be an expert to record tax transactions and generate returns in Tally now. And of course, customers can now record error-free transactions with minimum support. Let's look at another scenario, reverse charge. In this scenario, part of the tax liability falls on the service receiver and part on the service provider. Let us see how Tally handles this easily. Let's go back to the product for scenario 2. Now, in order to handle reverse charge, we'll enable a few features. We'll go to F11, statutory and taxation, set all the service tax detail as yes. We see an option here, type of reverse charge. We'll set this to both and we'll accept. Let's create a few ledgers for this scenario. We'll go to accounts info, ledgers, create. We'll create a ledger called works contract. We'll classify it under purchase. Is service tax applicable? We'll say applicable. Set alter service tax detail. We'll set this to yes. Now, we do not see a service category created for this as yet. So we'll create a new service category from here. We'll press Alt C. Now, before creating a category, we'll press on F12 and we see an option called enable reverse charge details. We'll set this to yes. We can see on setting this to yes, we have another option while creating the category, is reverse charge applicable. So we'll call this category as manpower service. We'll specify the rate as 14%. Is reverse charge applicable? We'll say yes. And we'll set the provider's liability to be 40%. We'll specify the notification number. And we'll accept. We'll save the ledger. Now we'll create a party called ABC Manpower Agency under sundry creditors, and we'll accept. Now let's pass a purchase invoice. We go to accounting vouchers, purchase. We'll select the party ABC Manpower Agency. We'll select works contract. Let's enter amount. Let's say rupees 1 lakh. We'll select service tax, and we can see the service tax amounts gets calculated on its own. We go to tax analysis by pressing Alt A. We can see that the assessable value is 40,000, which is what we had defined in the category, that the provider's liability will only be the 40%. So 14% of 40,000 is rupees 5,600, which is the tax value that has been calculated. We'll accept this. Now we'll enter a payment voucher for ABC Manpower Agency. Now this is necessary because in the reverse charge scenario, we need to make a payment against the bill for the service tax liability to be generated. So we'll go to payment. We'll select the bank ledger. We'll select ABC Manpower Agency, and we'll pass on this transaction. We'll specify the instrument number, instrument date, and we'll accept. Now we go to display statutory reports, service tax reports, form ST3, and we can see that under the service tax credit availed, when we drill down, we can see this particular entry has been captured and the tax amount has also been captured. We can also see the detailed view of the same by pressing detail. As you saw in the demo, setting up reverse charge was very simple. Let's move to the next scenario, full reverse charge. In this scenario, 100% of the service tax liability falls on the service receiver. A typical example is goods transport agencies. Let us see how this can be implemented by goods transport agencies easily in Tally. Let us move back to the product to see how scenario 3 will be implemented. Now, as we had seen in F11, F3, under set alter service tax details, we had set type of reverse charge to be both. So this is required for the scenario 3 as well. Let's create a few ledgers for this particular scenario. We'll first create a new service category called Goods and Transport Agency. We'll go to Accounts Info, Statutory Info, Service Categories, and we'll select Create. Please note that F12 Enable Reverse Charge Details has to be set to yes for this case as well. So we'll name this Goods Transport Agency. We'll specify the service tax rate to be 14%. Is reverse charge applicable? We'll say yes. And provider's liability in this case is 0%, because we are dealing with the case of full reverse charge. We'll specify the notification number and we'll accept. Now we'll create a ledger. Let's call it Goods Transport Agency. We'll classify it under purchase. We'll say is service tax applicable, set alter service tax detail to yes, and we'll select the newly created service category Goods Transport Agency for this. We'll select this and accept. We'll create a party now, AK Transporter, under sundry creditors, maintain balances bill by bill to be yes, and we'll accept. Let's pass a purchase invoice now. Accounting vouchers, F9 purchase. We'll select the party AK Transporter. We'll select Goods Transport Agency. We'll specify the amount, let's say 1 lakh. Now if we select service tax over here, the amount should be 0, because the provider's liability in this case is 0%. So we can confirm that since no service tax is getting calculated, the configurations have been made properly. We'll select end of list and we'll accept. Now again, in order for a service tax liability to get generated, we'll have to pass a payment voucher. So we'll pass a payment voucher in this case also. We'll go to F5 payment. We'll select the bank. We'll select AK Transporter against reference. Specify the check number, instrument date, and we'll accept. We can go to display statutory reports, service tax reports, form ST3 to confirm that the same is reflected. We press enter on service tax payable, receiver's liability. And we can see under goods transport agency, the tax value of 14,000 has been captured. Now for the highlights of scenario 3. As you saw in the demo, setting up full reverse charge for goods and transport agency was complete in a few seconds. All you need to do was simply select the type of reverse charge as full or both and set the reversal percentage, that is the provider's liability of GTA service category, as 0%. No other additional settings or configurations are needed. Once you're done with the setup, enter a normal purchase invoice, make a payment entry, and see the liability getting generated in the ST3 report. Let's move to the next scenario, negative list. As per the service tax law, service tax is not applicable on certain types of services which fall under the negative list. Let us see how Tally ensures that such services are not taxed and that they are not reflected in the ST3 return. Again, for this scenario, we'll create a few masters. First, we'll create a new service category. We'll go to accounts info, statutory info, service categories, create. Now, we'll have to press F12 here and we'll set enable negative list of services to yes and accept. Let's call it services relating to agriculture. Does it belong to negative list of services? Yes. And we'll accept. Now we'll create a ledger. We'll go to accounts info, ledger, create. Let's create a ledger called agriculture services. Under purchase, is service tax applicable? We'll say applicable. Set auto service tax detail is yes. And we'll select the newly created service category, that is services relating to agriculture, and we'll accept. Now let's pass a purchase entry. Let's create a party for this. We'll press Alt C from here. Let's call it agro agency. Under sundry creditors, and we'll accept. We'll select agriculture services. Let's key in any amount, let's say 70,000 rupees. Again, since we have put it under negative list, when we select service tax, the rate of service tax should be 0. Let's check it. We can see that no service amount is being displayed, which means our configurations are correct. We'll select end of list over here and we'll save. In order to see its reflection in the ST3 report, we'll go to display statutory reports, service tax reports, form ST3, and we can see there is one transaction that is under excluded transactions. Let's drill down and see if this is the negative list transaction. We can see under the excluded transaction, we see vouchers having negative list of services. We further drill down to see that the entry that we just passed is being classified under the excluded transactions, which means this transaction will be excluded from the service tax report. Now for the highlights of scenario 4. As you saw in the demo, negative list of services is just a one step. All you need to do is create a new service category, define it as a negative list of service, and Tally does the rest. Let's move to the next scenario. Realization basis of tax computation. As per the service tax law, in realization basis of tax computation, liability arises only on receipt of amount for service rendered. The tax liability is both on the service provider and the service recipient. Let us see how Tally handles the realization basis of tax computation and ensure that they are reflected properly in the ST3 return. we'll move back to the product. For realization basis of tax computation, we'll again need to make some configurations. We'll go to F11 features, statutory and taxation. We'll go to set alter service tax detail. We'll set it to yes. Under compute the tax liability based on, we'll select realization for this. We'll also need to specify the date from which this will be applicable. Let's set it to 2nd April. And we'll accept. Now we'll create a new service category, commercial training and coaching services. Let's go to accounts info, statutory info, service category, create. We'll specify 14% to be the tax rate and we'll accept. We'll create a sales ledger called commercial training and coaching. We'll classify it under sales. Is service tax applicable? We'll say applicable. Set all the service tax detail yes. And we'll select the category that we just created. And we'll accept. We'll create a party. Let's call it Suraj Enterprises. Classified under sundry debtors. And we'll accept. Now let's pass some vouchers. We'll go to accounting vouchers. We'll first set the date to be 2nd April because that is the date since when we enabled the realization basis. We'll select sales. We'll select the party as Suraj Enterprises. We'll select commercial training and coaching. Let's key in an amount. Let's say 80,000. We'll select service tax. We can see the service tax gets calculated. And we'll accept. Now we'll need to pass a receipt entry against this. Let's select the bank. We'll select Suraj Enterprises against reference. We'll key in the instrument number, bank name, and we'll save the entry. We'll go to the ST3 report, display, statutory reports, service tax reports, form ST3. Now, there's another thing that has to be noted for realization basis. The realization basis is applicable only till the service turnover is below 50,000. After that, Tally switches over to the accrual basis. Then a receipt entry is not required for creating the liability. Now we can see from this report that after passing the sales entry and the receipt, the service tax liability gets created in the ST3 report. Now for the highlights of scenario 5. As you saw in the demo, setting up the realization basis of tax computation was very simple. Now, let us see the powerful capability of triangulation. Check status. In release 5.0, the service tax report form ST3 has been designed in such a way that the user can identify first, transactions included for generating the ST3 return, second, transactions excluded because they are not relevant, and third, transactions about which Tally is uncertain as to what to do because there is missing information or possible errors. This concept is called triangulation because of these three aspects. Drill down. The user can drill down into each type, included, excluded, and uncertain, and satisfy himself of the correctness of information. Corrective actions. In the uncertain bracket, Tally gives the different reasons for errors or missing information. The user can go directly into the master or transactions and correct the errors or provide the missing information. This results in 100% correct return, giving confidence of a hand-prepared return. Now let us see this powerful capability in action. Now in order to see the power of this capability, let us make some errors in the entries. Let's go to our entries. Let's say for this entry, we manually change the service tax amount from 14,000, which is the correct amount, to 20,000. When we go to the statutory report, service tax reports, Form ST3, we can see that under the uncertain transactions, there is one particular transaction. Let's drill down. We can see the multiple heads over here. Under this, we can see that there's a mismatch in tax amount for one particular voucher. Let's drill down and we find out that the particular entry for which we made a change in the tax amount is getting reflected over here. Let's see how we can correct this. The user can either choose to accept it as it is, as there may be certain exception scenarios, or if you want to correct this, we can either create an adjustment entry, or if you have not filed in the return, we can directly go to the entry, click on the service tax amount, press space, press enter, and the amount gets corrected. So that's how easy it is. Now let's see how we can make a stat payment directly from here. We see an option called stat payment. We press on this. We specify the time period for which we want to make the stat payment. We can also mention the payment type. In this case, we're making a regular payment. We select the bank. We select service tax, and the amount gets captured. We specify the instrument number, the instrument date, and we accept the transaction. And the stat payment is made. After making the stat payment, we can see in the triangulation report, under the payment details heading, it shows us whether the payment is being made or not. So if the payment is made, it will either show in the included transaction or in the excluded transaction, whichever the case may be. We'll see more about this in the next scenario. Now for the highlights of triangulation, we saw how simple it was to identify missing information and errors, how easily we could provide the information and correct errors, and as a result, get complete confidence that the return is 100% accurate. Save returns. Now imagine a scenario. A businessman finalizes his service tax returns, then the accountant makes backdated additions, alterations. How will anyone know about such changes? Release 5.0 gives a powerful capability of saving returns. After you save the return, whatever changes are done, they will get reflected in a triangulation report, thereby helping in immediate action. Also, if you accept the changes, you can easily file a revised return. Let us see this in action. Now, in order to see this capability, let us first save our return. We'll go to Display, Statutory Reports, Service Tax Reports, Form ST3. We see an option of F6 that says Save. We'll press this and we'll save the return. Now let us make a few alterations. For the period for which we've saved the return, let's key in a new entry. Go to Sales. Let's specify the date as 2nd April. Select this party. Advertising, say 60,000. Let's save this entry. Let's go to our day book. Specify the period of April. Let's change a few entries. Let's change this rate to 1,50,000. Let's delete this entry. And so forth. Let us come back to the triangulation report and see Form ST3. We see that a line is highlighted on the top in blue that says the return values might have been changed. Press F5 to recompute. Now it tells us what masters have been modified and what vouchers have been modified. Let's drill down into this modified vouchers option. It is showing us 4 options. If any new vouchers were created, if any were altered, if any vouchers were cancelled, and the last one deleted. We can drill down and see it will show us all the vouchers that we had just changed. So it shows us this newly created voucher under ABC Limited Party. It shows us the voucher that we altered, shows us the altered amount here, and it also shows us the deleted voucher, that is the AK Transporter one. Now if we choose to reaccept this, we can recompute. This will recompute the service tax amount based on the newly made changes. When we click on save, it will ask us whether we want to save it as a revised return. So we get an option of saving a revised return as well. We'll say yes. In order to view both the returns that we've saved, under service tax report, we'll go to return transaction book. When we go there, we can see both the returns, the original one and the revised one. Again, you can make the start payment from this screen as we had done earlier. Now we can see that a user can do all of this from a single screen. That is a triangulation report. Now let us see how we should engage with an existing user of Tally ERP9. A few guidelines. First, you must take a backup of his data. Then you can migrate the data to release 5.0. After successful migration, you will see a message. Click on the message and view the getting started document. This document tells you the steps to be followed before you start entering fresh data in 5.0. Now let us see the powerful capability of triangulation using an existing user's data. Let's move on to the product. Now for this scenario, we'll have to open an existing data. Let's press on select company. We have an existing data. We'll open this up. Let's set the appropriate time period for this data. Let's go to triangulation report now. Display, statutory reports, service tax reports, form ST3. Let's specify the period as April. Let's see. It tells us that there are 8 transactions. 4 have been included, 1 has been excluded, and there are 3 uncertain transactions. Let's drill down to the excluded transactions. It tells us that there are 1 voucher under the contra vouchers that have been excluded. Please note that the excluded grouping is not on voucher basis but on the nature of transaction, which makes it easier for the customer to identify which set of vouchers have been excluded. We'll escape. Let's drill down to uncertain transactions. Now we see that it tells us that there are 2 vouchers for which it is unable to determine the service category. Let's drill down. We see that there is a ledger called courier service for which we have not specified the service category. Now we can specify the service category from this screen itself. We'll press space. We'll press on set category. We'll press space and we'll see the list of categories. So we select the courier services. We specify from 1st April 2014 and we accept. You can see that it goes off from here. Next, it is telling us that it is unable to determine the type of duty. This comes under the duty ledger. This is again a master related exception that we're correcting. Let's drill down. We select this and we set the duty type. We say this is under service tax. Under the tax head, we select any and we accept. Next, under the transaction related exceptions, it is telling us that there is a mismatch in tax details of masters and transactions. Let's drill down. This is telling us that there is a mismatch in service category in masters and transactions. Let's go to the entry to understand what exactly is the problem. Press enter. On looking at this purchase voucher, we can see that a telephone service was purchased worth rupees 10,000 and the party selected in this case is ABC Agency SEZ unit. When we go to the list of the parties, we see that there is a particular party called Airtel Koramangala, which seems to be the appropriate party for a telephone service. So we select Airtel Koramangala. We select service tax, 12.36. We see that the service tax gets calculated appropriately and we save the entry. Now we see that there are no other exceptions. We press escape. We see that the triangulation is complete. There are 8 transactions, 7 have been included in the service tax, 1 has been excluded. Under the service tax credit availed, please note that these are the input credit transactions for which we've availed the input credit. There's another section here that is the payment details that we discussed earlier. Let's see what it is. It tells us that there is one payment entry that is currently not included. Let's drill down to understand what exactly is the reason. Again, it gives us a set of reasons that can be either under a master related exception or the transaction related exception. It tells us that for one particular voucher, it is not able to determine the nature of payment. Let's drill down. We select this and we set the payment type. Before doing that, it is advisable to see the entry. Now we see that this is a service tax regular payment that has been made. Now we select this entry, set payment type, and we can select regular. Let's escape. There's another exception that has been raised. It says that it is not able to determine the payment details. Let's drill down and we can specify the payment details. 1st April to 30th April, we can specify the BSR code, the challan number, and the challan date, and we accept. This is how the tax payment included and excluded section works. Now we see that this triangulation report is absolutely complete. There are 8 transactions, out of which 7 have been included and 1 is excluded. Under the payment details, 1 tax payment has been included. Let's move on to the summary section. In a nutshell, Release 5.0 makes tax management simple. Simple to set up. As we saw in the demo, setting up service tax in Tally was simple and did not take more than a few minutes. There is no configuration required for most businesses. For few businesses which have a little complex requirement, very minimal configuration is needed. Simple to enter transactions. As already demonstrated, we could enter the first invoice in a few minutes of creating the company. Simple to enter tax adjustment and payment entries. As you saw, it is so simple to enter adjustment and payment entries. Flexible. We can handle any complex requirement in a simple manner, whether it is setting up a GTA or reverse charge, tax computation on realization basis, etc. Very minimal configuration is required. Accurate. Because of minimal configuration, Release 5.0 ensures that minimal errors occur. Triangulation. The powerful triangulation report helps you identify which transactions have been considered for the return and which have not because of missing information, thereby helping in generating the right return. Saving returns and revised returns. We saw how a user can save his return and get visibility of all changes that happen after saving. Also, he is able to revise a return and then file the revised return, all in a simple manner. We'll move on to the FAQ section. First, is there an audit report for altered transaction? The Tally philosophy is that if a user can see what edits or deletes he has done in Tally, then so can someone else. And it can become difficult to explain the genuine reasons why you made these changes to your book of accounts. Therefore, we will still not provide transactional audit. When we save the service tax triangulation report, the report gets saved with the final figures and also the connected masters and transactions. If the transactions or masters are changed, Tally will be able to point out that there have been changes to those masters and transactions that were part of the saved report. Tally will not be able to say what were the changes. The user will need to identify them manually, and if the changes made require the users to file a revised return, he must do so. Second, how do I rectify errors in the service tax charged? There are many ways. If the tax return has not been filed and the customer has not yet filed his return, you could cancel the earlier invoice and make a new one. Second, the difference in the tax can be charged or refunded via supplementary transaction. Or third, even if the returns have been filed, the law permits revised returns to be filed. Your auditor will suggest the best method for your case. Tally handles these cases in 5.0. Third point, the government issues a new service tax rate. In case of rate changes, you can now specify the new rate and proceed with your transactions. You do not have to wait for the start update. Of course, if the return formats have changed, it will be delivered via the capsule delivery of updates, so users can get these updates instantly from Tally. Will Tally track masters? Yes, the triangulation report will highlight the changes made in masters that may have an impact on the returns. This is all about service tax in Tally ERP9 Release 5.0.